This is All the Rage with Paige. I'm Paige, and today we are going to be talking about interests. I just turned 30 over the weekend, and the fuzzy palms on my head are actually a gift for my birthday. And I wore them when I went out thrifting on my birthday, and I gotta tell you, I felt cute as fuck. I felt so cutie. It was absolutely fantastic. I also put like lashes on, like I was popping. And I felt popping. I was walking like I was popping. I was popping in my walking. And I felt like everyone was looking at me. And like, I feel like when I get in those moods where I think everybody's looking at me, like it could be times where I'm feeling self-conscious, but I love those times where it's because like I am just fully confident that I've got it going on. I'm just like, I mean, of course they are. Of course they're looking at me. I am a vision. I'm a vision for everybody to acknowledge when they see me. I was in one of those moods and it was just great. I found so many good things, and yeah, it just kind of got me thinking about all these new interests that I've just really dove into this year. This year was like my year of like finding my style, like we talked about last episode, but also, you know, my self-love journey. It took the biggest leap by far this year. A lot of it has had to do with just me playing again. I think play is such a big part of like our lives, quote unquote, purpose. And so I've just kind of been embracing that. So, you know, with the self-love journey, I've been trying to, you know, do a lot more things to, you know, take action towards showing myself that I love myself. A lot of that has to do with like remembering those things that I do love. What things make me happy? How can I spend my free time to just enjoy myself? And that usually makes you think of your interests, your hobbies. And just like with my style, it's given me a lot of questions as far as the things that I end up choosing. What is the influence? And I keep questioning like, who am I, right? And that includes like how much of all of these things that I pick and choose all throughout my everyday and my thought, you know, including my thoughts, the decisions I make, all of it, my perceptions of what I'm seeing at all times. How much of that is actually genuinely, authentically me? Did it come from something in my past? Did it come from a wrong perception that I had by observing something, you know, when I was 3 years old? It just makes you question a lot of things. Thinking this way. Do we really pick and choose what our interests are? Is it something that's kind of given to us in childhood and then we pick and choose later on? Is it the influences that we have throughout our life where we end up where we are? I don't know, but let's talk about it. I asked you guys, have your interests changed a lot since childhood? 31% said exponentially, and 38% have said like most of your interests have changed. I made the wrong assumption that most people, for the most part, have like similar interests from the things that they first were interested in their lives. I don't know. But that's part of why I love doing these polls, because I kind of like being proven wrong in some of these things, because it's made me like overthink things a lot less. I am a strong believer that like there's not a lot of answers to a lot of questions, especially when it comes to life, but in most things really, and that all of us are just people. And though we are so similar to one another in a lot more ways than I think we would like to know, I also think that there's just like endless variations and answers to everything. And that includes like the perceptions that we can have about obviously the completion of all of this. Okay, so I asked you guys what your biggest influence was for interests in your childhood, and 46% of you said family members, which I feel like all of us, of course, are influenced by our family members, you know, whether that's our genetic family or not. But especially like as a parent, like seeing the way that kids are, it's natural for them to copy you and have your mannerisms. And I think that honestly goes through to adulthood, because like I will even work with somebody for an extended period of time and pick up on mannerisms that they have. I see that in a lot of people too. I think we're very highly influenced by our environment, but we don't need to really go into all that because I'm sure a lot of us have already learned about this, and I'm no expert in anything. Is anybody an expert in anything? I guess so. If you spend enough time studying and working in it, of course you're an expert, but nobody knows all the answers to anything. I asked, what influences your interest today? And 75% of you said myself / not sure. And my perception of this answer is that I think we all want to believe that, we really know ourselves at this point and that we pick and choose the things that we're into. And I think there's definitely some of that to a degree, but I also think we're subconsciously influenced all the time and that it affects our thoughts more than we consciously realize. But you guys might be thinking that same thing when you're answering this. I don't know, though. I can't assume anymore because clearly I'm wrong a lot. I asked, have you guys ever been surprised by your interest? The question came from people that, follow cults or QAnon and things like that. I've always been fascinated by those people because it just makes you wonder, how did you get there? But then I find myself in internet rabbit holes all the time. Everybody jokes about that. It's obviously a thing. And like I was just saying before about being subconsciously influenced, I think a lot of us kind of get into niche obsessions randomly at times. And I don't know, I'm trying to think if there's anything that I'd gotten really into and then looked back and was like, why was I doing that? And I can't really think of anything. There's definitely been hobbies that I've dropped off on, but I haven't really had a moment like that where it was like, whoa, don't know what was going on with that chapter. Well, never mind. I have had those thoughts, but not about me following something, that just me following my internal voice. 54% of you said that you haven't really been surprised because your interests seem to ebb and flow. And then in second place, 23%, not usually surprised, it all makes sense, which was my answer. But like I said, I have definitely had some times where I'm deep diving into something that by the next day I know I'm going to have no interest in, which I feel is a micro version of the influence that we're talking about today. So I attempted to do some research, aka I watched a single YouTube video, and I got some good data points. I got some good verbiage that I probably won't remember the definition of, and we'll probably have a hell of a time trying to explain it. So me being off tonight is really going to do me some favors. I should probably cite my sources. The video was from SciShow Psych. SciShow Psych. And the first point that I wrote down was self-positivity bias. We do tend to gravitate towards beliefs in ourselves that shine us in a good light. So if we perceive that something is cool or would make us a good person, we do tend to believe those things about ourselves or do things to try to convince ourselves of those things. And I think that could include not only our general opinions on other people's interests, but our own as well. Even if we wanted to secretly tap dance, if we perceived that as not being a positive and worthwhile hobby, then we might not ever try it for ourselves. That's kind of how I was taking on that direction on interest in psychology. And then the next point that I liked that they made was about the IKEA effect. So that essentially meaning we're going to view things in a higher regard when we put the work and effort into it. So if you, I guess, started a hobby as a kid and you really wrote it home. You really wrote it home, and then you take that on into adulthood. Even if as an adult, it's not really your vibe anymore, sticking with it because you're well, I already spent all this time. I'm not going to be happy enough with where I ended, and looking back and just accepting it as a nice learning experience I need to make something out of this. And the next point they made was about sensation seeking. And the example that they gave was actually about horror movies. So they were saying that people who are more pleasure seeking tend to gravitate things more that evoke emotion and bring a lot of emotions to you. So even if they were showing them, the same movie split in half of people who love horror movies and people who don't, they really are evoking the same emotions. They're all scared, but then the people that enjoy horror movies ended with a positive emotion because they liked the thrill of being scared. Being scary was fun. And then the other half don't enjoy being scared, like to avoid having too heightened of emotions. Or possibly they're just like a different type of empathetic where like they can't handle seeing those emotions. Like they're not able to distinguish that it's like fake, or see the fun in it, I guess. I found that pretty interesting because like my favorite movie as a kid was Alice in Wonderland. And I liked it because it scared me. And I was kind of even like at that time confused by that. Like, why do I love this so much if it's scary? But it was beautiful at the same time. And I think I have always been very fascinated with that contrast or balance of light and dark. Like how things can be so beautiful, but eerie and scary at the same time. I love it. But I do think, just based on my own experiences and observations, I have seen that pattern of like, the kind of people that do really like out there things or like art, that evokes a lot of emotion usually. I do feel like those people tend to like, again, this is just on observation, feel really deeply, seek to feel deeply. So that would make sense to me of like why different types of people might go for different interests based on that pleasure seeking factor. What kind of pleasure are they seeking? We're all seeking pleasure in some ways, but I think like that emotions aspect would definitely be a big factor in like what type of interest you might be going for. And they also mentioned dopamine, which is, obviously related to the pleasure seeking, but we all enjoy dopamine and we get dopamine hits when we get rewarded for a certain behavior. So we want to keep doing that behavior to get that feeling again. And so I think that relates to interest as far as like, if we try something new and we have an experience that does give us that dopamine hit, we're going to be so much more likely to keep going for that thing. So like, for example, I'm thinking of like, adrenaline junkies, like how they need to go for that next thing that's going to make them full of adrenaline and excited, getting that dopamine hit. Same with like runners. I think runners get addicted to like, the afterwards runner's high. I think they were in the video even talking about like people who like spicy food. It's like our brain's way of concentrating on the fact that like we got through the heat, we're strong and we liked it. I think their other example was about like pimple popping. Like how if you're like picking at a pimple long enough and then you see it burst out, like that registers in your brain like, I succeeded, I got it. And then people take it even further by like getting addicted to watching other people do it. And I think it's, just whatever ways that we come across, whether it's online, in person, whatever, that we get that dopamine hit, we kind of want to do it again and see how far we can take it. They also talked about benign masochism, which is when like you're kind of watching or observing a negative experience, knowing that it's not going to happen to you. So, for example, like I think that explains people that really love reality TV because of the drama. It's something they can observe, but they're not involved in. So they know that, they're safe, they're cool. Or even like that horror movies example, people get pleasure out of like, I'm feeling these emotions, I'm watching this story unfold, and those people are getting murdered, but I'm at home, safe, under a blanket, and there's some pleasure in that sort of controlled experience. So yeah, I thought that was an interesting video. Like, it definitely made me think of some things. It didn't exactly explain like where those interests come from, but it did help explain like kind of what's going on subconsciously or in our brains about these things. Another part of this conversation that was really just running through my mind was the difference between like influence and idolization. Because, you know, even when it comes to our interests being influenced by like our family members, parents, you know, friends, or even celebrities, I do feel like it's a confusing line between being inspired versus like idolizing somebody. And just now, when I was saying that, like, I feel like being inspired by somebody to me is like soaking up their aura, using what they're putting out and just use it as fuel for yourself to utilize. And then I feel like idolizing, you're seeking something to kind of like make decisions for you, or to know where to go, something to follow, something to become a part of as a group. Actually, I talked about this with a couple people, but with one of them, I made a joke about how like I might end up having to admit that Swifties kind of annoy me. I kind of have the ick for Swifties. And she made a good point of like, I'm sure people think or feel the same way when it comes to like us and astrology. And people that don't know me very well, but like watch my stories would probably think that I like live and breathe astrology. And the truth is, I don't really know that much about it. It's just really fun. And if I'm on Instagram, like I don't spend a lot of time like on the browse page or on even the home page. Like I mostly just watch my own story, watch my close friends' stories, and look at some astrology stuff. So yeah, I'll like repost astrology a lot. And yeah, so I was like, well, touche, because yeah, point made. Point made. And a lot of people hate astrology. 100% of those people know absolutely nothing about it. I even used to be one of those people. When I was in my early 20s, my oldest sister gave me an astrology book. And when I was reading it, I was like getting legitimately pissed off. Like, this book doesn't know me. I'm unique. No, none of us are really that special, which is fine. I'm completely content with that. And no, I'm not. If I'm being honest, I still like feeling special. Both can be true. Both can be true. This is pretty obvious, but I do think when it comes to our icks, how we perceive, you know, mostly other people's interests is purely based on like our past experiences and our perceptions of other people throughout growing up. So, you know, the same as what we're interested in, I think we're equally influenced in the opposite direction of our dislikes or what we perceive to be uncool or morally wrong and things like that. And I was trying to reflect on like, you know, why am I so against idolization, and came up with like a couple possibilities. And one being the fact that I don't want to believe that I'm, you know, very easily influenced. And so I think that I see that people who are like super fans, and I'm just like, oh, that's, you know, it's kind of embarrassing. Or like, I think it also, in my mind, like almost cheapens the art or the artist in a way, because then I'm like, well, then, you know, their fans are just going to be ride or die. They're going to love everything that they put out. So is their stuff even really that good? And also, I don't know, there's just something to me, like there's more dopamine that comes to me if I find a song that has very little plays versus millions. And so I don't really know what that truly says. But like at the same time, I also do know that I'm influenced. But I also like to believe that I'm like more conscious of it than maybe other people might be. So yeah, it's like I know that there's probably a lot more to the reality of that. But that is, I think, a big part of why I perceive idolizing as a negative. I perceived myself as somebody who has, for the most part, kind of stayed in the same interests. Like I've always very much loved music. I've always loved writing. I've always loved content creation, of course, including my selfies. And as far as my influence on those things, I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain. I'm assuming that everybody kind of agrees to this, at least to some degree. But I feel like it's like, you're influenced by the things around you, obviously your environment, most likely your family, friends, whatever is on the TV, all of those things put together. And I don't know, you just kind of hear something that does something to your brain. Like, I feel like that's a good way to describe it when it comes to like music, at least, because there's no way to really describe like why I like a song and you don't like that same song. Like, it's just something that it does to the brain. Is it that like you heard certain sounds when you were a little kid, and so when you hear it again, subconsciously your brain registers that same sound to that past memory? That's kind of like how I perceive it in a way. Or like, how you listen to a song and it instantly takes you back to whenever you listen to that song the most. It's kind of like that same thing. Even though music has always been a really big part of my life, I definitely think my taste has definitely evolved over the years. And I think in the beginning, I was influenced by whatever was on, different family members, obviously friends, things in the media, when you pick and choose from there. But I think, of course, because of the internet, things were able to be a lot more individualistic because people could seek things out on their own. So I definitely think my taste made the biggest leap at that point when I was like in middle school and was exploring. I think I still like a lot of the stuff that I have liked since the beginning and up until this point, but it's definitely just in general more defined, a little more mature, I guess you would say. I was trying to think of interests that I picked up and just completely dropped. And the biggest one that comes to me is like homesteading, which I think really became big in 2020 because of COVID. And it's just such a big thing on social media right now. And I don't think that was the main influence, because I think the main influence for me was actually, my own family. It's definitely something that I've been around, but I think it's more for me, like I like the idea of it, but I don't actually have interest in learning about it. And I don't really have interest in doing it. And it's something that is so hard, which I think most things are pretty hard and most things take a lot of time to get good at them, right? But yeah, with homesteading, I was just like, this would be so fantastic for the family, for myself. Like, I like being healthy. It's obviously like the best option when it comes to like lifestyle in a lot of ways. But I finally, after a few years, just came to realize it's just not for me. I care a lot more about my other interests, and homesteading pretty much takes 24/7 effort. And yeah, I kind of opt out of that one. So yeah, dream big. I might do a few things like making my own kombucha. I did that for a long time. I am taking a break right now, even though it's like really not that hard. But I like that flexibility of like, if I want to take a break, not everything's going to crumble. I like that. So I think I'm going to pick and choose when it comes to that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's okay to change your mind. It's always okay to change your mind. One of you made the point to me of like new stages also bring in new interests. I do think that's a great point, because one of the common examples that you guys actually gave me as far as your top 3 interests, I think almost all of you said something to the effect of one of them being like your health, which I'm just going to guess as children, probably not a top priority or interest. And then same with home. That was also one of the top answers for your guys' top 3 interests, was stuff to do with your house, which again, may not have been at its peak in childhood. Overall, I will say that I think it's not really worth overthinking about, because I think a lot of these things are just really subconscious. It's fun to observe, brainstorm, and reflect. Use it to try to really think if we want to spend time doing something. But for the most part, just have fun with it. Have fun with yourself. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed thinking about your interests and you do something interesting now. All right, I love you guys, and I'll catch you at the polls next week. Bye!